So let's rewrite this so that we're going to have a middle tier here that's going to negotiate the data access, right? So that instead of the front end here, the view accessing the database, there should be an intermediary layer here. So let's build that. In Java, there's a couple of ways. The simplest is to create what is called a servlet, right? That allows you to receive HTTP requests and map it to some action, right? There are frameworks around the servlet. One of the more common ones is Swing and Spring MVC, right? Those are frameworks that are built around an abstraction layer, right, of these low-level implementations. Okay, I'm not going to cover Spring, but if anybody use Spring MVC? A few, okay. So if you use Spring MVC and you feel comfortable using Spring MVC, go ahead. If you feel comfortable using Hibernate or some of these ORMs, I will cover JPA as an abstraction layer for ORMs a little later, but not specifically Hibernate, right? Although Hibernate is just one implementation of JPA. We will cover JPA a little later. But again, the simplest way of creating a middle tier controller in an application is through servlets. So let's do that. Let's create our first controller. Typically, there will be a controller for every type of data that you are manipulating. Right? In this case, we're manipulating the website data type, right, or website table, right? The list of websites. We are adding new websites. We're removing websites. We are updating websites. So the website is our the data model that we want to manipulate, right? The user interface wants to render these things. So somebody has to fetch data. We already decided that the user interface should not access the data. Instead, there should be some intermediary. And so we'll create a controller for that. So all these tiers, typically they implement some kind of boundary between different worlds, right? The view is the boundary between the user, right, and our application. Okay. The controller is the boundary between the view, right, and wherever our application lives. Typically, our application will live in some server, right? And the most common way to communicate with the server is through HTTP. Yes? So that layer between our server, where our code lives, the way we talk to it is through HTTP. And so that's a boundary. We have the view out there, and as the user interacts and clicks and drags and does and interacts with the view, the only way for the view to notify our application that something's happening, right? The only communication protocol is through HTTP. Okay, so the control layer that we're going to talk about now is that boundary, right? It's receiving some stream events that are coming from our view, right? And it's converting it into some object representation. Okay, it's parsing this stream world from HTTP, putting it back into some object representation, either PHP or Java or Python, back into some object or electronic representation. Yes, and the data access layer is yet another interface, right? Interaction between our object world, right, and again back into some file representation. Yes, so again, there's another boundary layer there, right? That then stores it for permanent storage. Right? So these three worlds, where you have somebody generating events, then getting into this server that is temporary, right? It's being stored in RAM, right? It has some schema representation in temporary memory storage, and then representing it in some long-term storage memory. So it's three different worlds that talk about. Again, all three worlds have different concerns. So let's create our first data layer that's going to interact with our interface. So let's create our new servlet. Did we create a servlet already? We haven't. I don't believe so. No? No servlet. Oh wait, we do. Did we? Did we create? We did create one, didn't we? Huh. Okay. Well, it looks like maybe I had started just with hello. Maybe that's where we left off. Okay. All right. So we did create a servlet. Let me do it from scratch again. Before I go, notice that it's complaining, saying that website DAO is no longer a public constructor. And so I'm going to upgrade this to its new implementation, get instance, so that it doesn't complain. But let's create it from scratch so that we can review what we did last week. All right, so let's create here a new servlet. So this is going to be our controller. It's going to receive all the HTTP events from our view. So this is going to, I'm going to call the website. I'm going to call it controllers, and the class name is going to be website controller. Okay, and I'm going to now map it, right, to a URL. So if anybody wants to communicate with this controller, it has to go through this URL, right? Again, it's going to be listening at a particular port at a particular URL pattern, and when that URL pattern is invoked, this servlet will execute. Okay. Right now, I'm just gonna keep the default URL pattern, and I'm just gonna receive gets and posts. Although I can configure it to listen also for puts, deletes, options, head, inits, destroy, a lot of events. Right. I'm just gonna handle the default ones. Yes. You say finish. And it generates a boilerplate servlet for us, okay? Which we can just execute at the server. We can say just run this, and it understands that this is a server-side resource, right? It can only ever execute on the server, and there it is, right? Served at. And just to verify that this indeed is live, we can change this. We can say hello from website controller. Served at, and our server presumably will recompile, right? And we can refresh here, and now it says there it is. So hello from website controller, yes. And I can also access it from here. Okay, so hello from website controller. Everybody good? All right. So what this is, the responsibility of this controller is to handle all the possible use cases of the view. The view wants to do what? The view wants to list all the websites, wants to create websites, wants to update websites, wants to delete websites. All those are the use cases that the view wants to implement as a user clicks and drags and types and whatnot. Yes. So our controller is responsible for receiving all those requests and then handing it off to the model for implementation. Yes. All right, so let's get started with the first couple of things that I would like to be able to do is first, we like to be able to, the very first thing that I like to do is retrieve websites, right? That's what our simple data example wants to do. I want to get a hold of the websites. That's what it wants to do. Right now it's doing it bypassing, going directly to the model. Bad, right? So how should we do it instead? We should do it in the controller. In the controller, we're going to take some of the code from here, and we're going to move it over to the servlet. So let's grab this, copy, and let's move it over to the controller. Okay? It wants to load the DAL. Let's load it. Let's import it. Oops, is that it? This is annoying, this console. Can I move it elsewhere? There it is. Let's move it to the right-hand side. There we go. Okay, so I have my DAO here. I've got an instance. I need to import also the array list. There it is. And I'll import the website as well. Website, ooh, my classes are different, right? This is this website controller, and this website is in the model, import lecture JDBC model website. There we go. Okay. So there it is. Our controller is getting a hold of the websites. Now it needs to pass it along to the view, right? The view should not fetch any of this data, but instead our controller is fetching it for it. Okay. So the way we're gonna handle that, the way we're gonna handle it is, we did all this. JNDI, employee list, singletons. We did singletons, servlets. Okay. What's going to do is that it's going to store this brand new website list, right? That it gets fetched. It's going to store it in some place where the servlet can get a hold of it, right? One of the places that the servlet can get the view can get a hold of it is in the request. Notice that the request is going to come in because the user clicked on something or generated some request, right? The server is going to see it, is going to execute the actions to go fetch the data, right? And then is going to put it somewhere where the view can get a hold of it. One place that we can get a hold of it is in the request, right? We can store it as an attribute, courses, and put the course. Not courses, websites, right? And put the list of websites in there. So this is the request is live, right? It came from the user as they clicked on something, submitted some form, did something, right? The request is live. We have it. We haven't responded yet to the client, right? We do have both the request that represents everything that came from our client. We do get a response where we can respond back to the server, but we don't want to respond just yet, right? Instead, we're going to send the request over to the view to render something, right? And then the view will send back just plain old ASCII HTML back to the client, to the user, right? But it's going to be the same request, right? It's going to be the same request handled by the controller, and the controller is going to pass the request over to the view for rendering. Okay. And meanwhile, before sending it over for rendering, it's going to store the websites in a hash table, right? In a hash table that is going to have this key that then the view is going to be able to retrieve it from the hash table for rendering. Once we store it in there, we can get a hold of the view. We can get a hold of the view. Right now, it's what's our call? Simple DAO example. So this will be simple DAO example JSP. And this lives where? This lives right here in the web content. So it's this one, simple DAO. Okay, example there, that one. Yes, that's the one we want to send it over. Okay, and then we're just gonna send the request over. We're gonna dispatch the request. Oops. The request dispatcher allows us to get a hold of the of that JSP of the view, and then send a forward the request and the response to the view. So let's grab the dispatcher from the JavaX servlet. There it is. So let's try it out. Let's notice that it used to just spit out hello from website controller. If we refresh, notice that it sent it over to the view. The view is still getting its data from the DAO directly, right? Which it shouldn't. Instead, we're going to refactor the JSP instead to not get it from the data directly. Instead, we're going to say, hey, in the list of websites, don't go to the DAO to fetch it. Instead, the controller put it for you in a hash table, right? In the request, you can say request. Request is an object that is available in the view, right? The request, the response. There's several other applications. There's a couple of few session. There's several objects that are available in the view to communicate back to the user. So request, we can get the attribute, and the name was websites. Now the hash table can hold any data type. Right? In this case, it's holding what? What did we put in there? We put in there the websites, which is of type ArrayList website. Yes, but in the hash table, you can put any object. Right? So you need to cast it back to the original data type. So let's cast it back. Right? And now we have the website, not from us going directly to the DAO, but instead the controller put it there, right? So that we're not breaking MVC. So let's refresh our controller. Let's refresh and let's see if this still works. Okay, it didn't blow up. Okay, so it's still good. Everybody good? Right. All right. So we implemented the one of the various use cases, which is retrieving all the lists of all the websites. Right. We still have to implement quite a few, being able to create new ones, be able to delete and whatnot. All right. So let's go and do that next.